have a very specific way I want to start this podcast.
Okay.
So bear with me.
Okay.
Are we recording? Hello. and welcome to Mastermind. My name is Marc. Marc, sorry. I think this is your script.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
of course.
You
Sorry,
think after a million episodes I'd remember how to do it?
No, but I think this was low-key my audition. So,
Okay. Yeah. But go for it.
Thank you very much. That was it.
Well, it's funny because like Mastermind, I was not the original host of Mastermind. And the original host, Jen Byrne, she broke her arm, I think, about a week or two in. I got this quite panicked phone call from somebody at SBS saying, "Can you come in and fill in for a couple of days?" And I had not watched Mastermind before filling in.
Right.
So I literally watched the show in the car on the way to filling in for Jen. And that was my first time. And so actually the first time I hosted Mastermind, I was a little bit like, hello, my name is Marc and this is Check's Watch Mastermind. So I'm familiar with the experience.
Right. Well, I hope I did well. What do you think?
You did great, buddy.
Thank you. Marc, if you ever break your arm, you know who to call.
Yeah, well, now I'm really paranoid. Like, I'm really paranoid about getting injured or sick.
Okay.
I have done that show through, like, completely losing my voice.
No way.
We've had to go back in and, like, re-record my lines. I think last season not this last season that's just finished in the last couple of weeks, but I think 2 years ago we shoot 5 episodes a day. So if I've lost my voice on that day, that's a week of television that's garbage. And if I'm sick or I take a day off or I'm injured or I'm on jury duty, that costs the production hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I just work through. But then they were like, So it turns out nobody can understand the words you've said. So I had to go back in and re-record it. But that's my I call it my Asian work ethic. I'm like, I will work through anything.
Yeah, you'll go through anything. But my question is like, so do the contestants understand you?
Great question.
So do they just cut back to you every time you ask a question?
No, they can't cut back to me is the thing, right? Because it's such a rigidly formatted show.
Right.
The camera has to be on them. You only ever hear my voice, which is why it's easy for me to re-record. Can the contenders hear the questions when I've completely lost my voice? Look, I will say they did surprisingly well given the nonsense that they were faced with from me.
Wow.
None of them complained. But even if they had, I'm not sure what we could have done about it other than give them replacement questions, which we have done occasionally.
Okay.
If people are like, I just straight up didn't hear you. The distinction that I think people get going from like being sick at pub trivia to then doing Mastermind is they forget the time pressure.
Yep.
And the lights.
Right.
Because what happens is you are in a when the questions start, you are in a completely black room. You cannot see anything. You cannot see cameras. You cannot see anything. All you can see is me. The UK version is very serious. And I'm not that serious as a person. So my attitude to the show when I took over was like, when they come and sit down in the chair, I want to get to know them. I want to celebrate what I view the show as a celebration of nerds.
Yeah.
And so I want to get to know what they're interested in. I want the audience to understand the incredibly niche, weird thing that they've picked. And then when the lights are down, I'm there to screw you. So it's like we call it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I was going to say something more inappropriate than that, but it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When you sit in the chair, I'm like, great, let's talk about the thing that you love. Okay, the lights are changing now, and you're stuffed. And we started doing, because my natural speaking voice is quite fast and staccato. We started doing a thing where to kind of manage the transition, it was like, and your time starts now. So actually going down an octave each word so that to kind of manage the transition.
No, I felt that though.
But now I've done, I think, more than 500 episodes.
6 seasons.
It's
basically 6 seasons.
Is it 6 seasons? Yeah. So next year will be season 9. But I've only done the.
You started season 3.
Yeah, that's good. You're across this. I'm like, okay, that's your age of work ethic.
Listeners and viewers, if you haven't already been able to tell, joining me today is Marc Fennell.
Have we not introduced me? Jesus Christ.
No, I just have to disclose
so sorry.
that. And before we started chatting, I only had $1 for a time that a job landed in Marc's lap, and out of panic, SBS had to be like, Marc, join us. Now I have $2. Let's talk about the first time, okay? I have a photo here. If you haven't seen this iconic photo of Marc you now have. Marc, I want you to talk to me about who was this guy, what was his hair routine, and what was going through his mind.
You know, it's funny because like curly hair is so back.
It is natural curls.
I sit down, like my Instagram is like so much full of like, and also like Jen, whatever the most recent one is so into curly hair, and I'm like, if you knew, seriously, this guy. Okay, so let me tell you the story of him.
Yes.
I'm 19. Yeah, I'm 19 in this picture.
Wow.
Yeah. So when David and Margaret were very famously part of the movie show for many, many years, I was a film critic. It was my first thing I did out of high school. And so David and Margaret announced they were going from SBS to the ABC.
Yep.
And SBS was quite desperate to get the movie show on SBS recast before David and Margaret launched on the ABC.
I told you guys, $2 now. $2.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was a desperate act. And so they did a nationwide call out.
Yep.
And I was 17.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'd been reviewing movies on a community radio station in Sydney, FBI, represent. I don't know what that, does that represent?
FBI represent.
Is that? I don't know. Do we say represent anymore? I'm old. Okay. So basically, this is the most like staccato version of this story ever. Sorry, ADHD has hit me hard this morning. So SBS wanted to launch the movie show before David and Margaret launched their version of the show on the ABC.
Right.
So they put out nationwide cast. They cast these three main presenters who are lovely film critic friends that I knew to host a panel. And I'm pretty sure they went, we've cast three white people. I'm quite sure they went, damn, we need a brown one. And so I had recorded... I'd recorded a video review that I'd done, and I got
What was the review on?
Donnie Darko.
Okay.
I remember it very clearly. It was like Donnie Darko and Mulholland Drive. So one's a David Lynch film and one's a Richard Kelly film. And so I recorded this, and I came in to the studio here, the same studio that I shoot Mastermind in.
Wow.
I sat in that chair. So now I'm doing like full show and tell. And I read this review that was supposed to be a 3-minute review, and I read it so fast that I think I knocked it out in about 32 seconds. And I looked at them and went, was that a bit fast? And they were just like, I think you just set a land speed record. But they hired me. Now, the weird thing about this is I was hired to do this like DVD reviewing segment off to the side.
Wow, DVD.
Yeah, I know. Like, it really dates it, right? But they didn't know how old I was when they hired me.
Okay.
So the day we were unveiled to the press was my 19th birthday. And SBS made this big song and dance. It's like, we're going to redo the movie show. Because they basically had competition at this point. Like, our version of the show is going to be broader and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the day we were unveiled to the press was my 19th birthday.
Wow.
And so for the first 3 years of my working existence, my first name was no longer Marc. It was 19-year-old Marc Fennell. I was 19-year-old Marc Fennell until I was at least 23. It's like nobody...
And then you enter a new age bracket.
Yeah. But like the way it came about was so weird though, because I had a coffee with a producer that worked here who'd reached out to me out of the blue, and I had no idea who she was, what it was. We had this coffee, and I didn't really understand what we were talking about or why we were talking about it. And then the next day, David and Margaret announced that they were leaving SBS to go to the ABC.
Okay.
And she's like, you should send in an audition tape. And I think my first response was like, nobody's going to want to watch the movie show without David and Margaret. And actually, as it turns out, I was right. I mean, but look, hey, it plucked me from community radio and put me on national television. His hair routine was very much what is now referred to as the curly girl method, which is you leave it wet, put a bit of conditioner in it, and let it. This is what I did discover though is like many, many, many hair and makeup people have tried to work with it, and what I learned is stay the away from my hair.
Don't touch it.
Don't touch it.
Don't touch it.
Yeah, don't touch it. My hair is naturally quite curly. Still.
Really?
Yeah. I just comb it now in the mornings.
Flick it down? Oh,
yeah,
nice.
I mean, the problem I have now is like, because in order to kind of keep it this way, in the mornings you do kind of look a little bit Lego man.
Yeah.
So I like to kind of like break it up a little bit.
Okay.
Because otherwise you do just look a little bit like Lego man.
Yeah.
Like
but we can confirm the curls are still there.
No, the curls are still there. My daughter's got the exact same hair, only red, which I think is confusing.
I think that's cool though.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I was asking I was asking kids whether I should bring back the curls.
What did they say?
There was disagreement.
Okay.
There was disagreement.
Why?
But occasionally, like on TikTok and Instagram, I'll post videos with curly hair and people are like, bring it back. And
Yeah.
the problem is I'm always shooting 4 things at once, right? And so you've got to keep in mind continuity, right? So if I had like straight hair in one interview and then the next interview I've got curly hair, bad.
Yeah.
And actually, the first episode of Stuff the British Stole, I was actually shooting in India and my hair did not survive the
humidity.
The humidity, yeah.
Yep.
And I was like, we're just going to go with it. Yep. But I got all of these messages being like, bring back the curls. And I'm like, too much effort.
Well, the generation that's bringing it back is my generation.
Yes,
Gen
it
Z.
is.
I do want to talk about a few things we have in common.
Like Gen Z or just you and I?
No, I don't think. Gen Z, and you're millennial, right?
I think I'm millennial.
Yeah.
Wait, well, are the definitions real?
Do you feel millennial?
Yeah.
What do you feel?
No, I do feel millennial.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I feel millennial in the sense that like my cultural reference points, music and stuff like that. I also feel like there's some language things.
Right.
So.
What confuses you about our language?
Oh, nothing confuses me. I just know that it sounds wrong coming from my mouth.
Okay.
No, so for example, like, did you do Healthy Harold as a kid?
No.
Okay. Are you familiar with Healthy Harold?
I am.
Okay, so Healthy Harold is the giraffe.
Yeah, I was jealous. I didn't get to do that.
Okay, so my daughter, who is in year 4, she came home and went, we did Healthy Harold today.
Okay.
Healthy Harold's eyebrows slay. Healthy Harold is a baddie. And I'm like...
Baddie.
Yeah. And I was like, Healthy Harold's eyelashes slay. Healthy Harold is a baddie. And I repeated it back to myself so many times and went, this is amazing.
It's a mantra now.
Yeah, but in fairness, though, I reckon Healthy Harold has had a bit of a glow up.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, so the
I
Healthy
should
Harold...
have pulled out a photo of Healthy Harold.
Well, how would you have known? How would you have known this is where it's going to go? And so Healthy Harold, when I was a kid, which, by the way, I'm just like shocked that Healthy Harold is still a thing. When Healthy Harold was like fairly plain looking, Healthy Harold does have eyelashes that slay. She showed me a picture and I'm like, Healthy Harold is a
hold
baddie.
on. She's had a glow up. We love our baddie, Healthy Harold.
Just like, but I was like, you see what I mean? Where like when she said it, I'm like, it's pretty funny because she's like.
Did you think that
10?
sentence could like kill a Victorian child? If anyone else heard this, they'd be like, "What on earth?" This is the only era someone could say that.
I think I just realized in that moment, like I could not convincingly say slay or baddie, and for it not to feel weird.
Okay, Mark, you know what I'm going to do after that?
What?
I'm just going to do an edit of you just saying slay,
Slay
and
and
baddie and
baddie.
turn it into a music remix.
Slay, baddie, slay, baddie.
Healthy Harold is baddie.
Also, just embracing the fact that, like, sometimes as people get older, they have like uncomfortability or rage at how younger generations talk. And I'm like, I spent so many years being the youngest person in the room, and now I'm very much not the youngest person in the room. I'm like, I think it's good to stay up. I think it's good to embrace as culture and language and values change. Like, I think it's great. But I also think it's good to recognize when, like, you can love what younger generations are doing, but also be like, I can't convincingly pull that off.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a difference between being old and grumpy and like, I'm going to stay with the same style and the same look. And it's, you know how like you see those people that are old but are like still kind of dressing like the 1970s or 1980s? I don't want to be that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, but at the same time, you can be embracing of younger generations' cultures and values, but at the same time, recognize that you can't quite convincingly pull it off.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, there are some, like, you reach a barrier where, like, maybe this is not for me, and then you keep moving forward. And then I think as the years go on, though, you still find things from younger generations that are new and upcoming that you're kind of like, yeah, I get that. And
Totally.
I will totally wear a fedora now that it's back and everything like that. And
there are some things my generation did that I'm also just like, that can die. Skinny jeans. Skinny jeans.
Yes, I agree. I agree
can
with
die.
you.
As a
Skinny
person-
jeans for men especially.
As a person like with thighs and calves, skinny jeans, be gone. You don't
You don't
need
need
to.
to. You're
we don't need
cancelled.
to come
You're
back.
gone.
You
Stay
didn't-
away.
You
Stay
do
away.
not need to come back.
Did you have a shark tooth necklace?
I did. That also
and then
that
you-
also can go.
No, I want to bring that back.
No,
Mark. And then you
no.
can be reminded of your past decisions
No.
of wearing a shark tooth necklace because
No.
I thought it was cool personally.
Did you?
Yeah, I do.
In like an anachronistic kind of way.
No, for real. I think shark tooth necklaces can come back. Low waisted jeans. This hair. needs to have its moment again. Everything that you did.
I don't. It's not as long as this anymore, but I do occasionally just let it be curly.
Yeah.
I didn't know how much about this conversation would be about my hair.
But I do. Okay, now that I have a genuine question for you, Mark.
These were not genuine questions.
No. I think these were my favorite questions. Though. I am the youngest person in the room
You are.
at SBS.
How old
in
are you?
LC. I just turned 24.
Hey.
I know. Yeah, thank you. I'm now aged out of the 23 though, so I'm no longer 19-year-old Suhayla anymore. But I am one of the younger people here doing work, and this is what I was going to talk about. The thing we have in common is we both went to UTS. You were there for 8 weeks. I did the whole 4 years.
Well done, you.
But we're still in the same place now.
Yeah,
How cool is
but I
that?
bet you aren't a disappointment to your mother. I took
My mum doesn't know. Like, she didn't know what I did though.
my mum only now just gets what I do.
Really? What does she? Okay, what does she tell other people that you do?
Well, it's easier now because I'm much more famous. I think
Right.
there was a long time where she was. Okay, so my mum's she's Indian, but she's from Singapore.
Yeah.
And my dad's white. So there's already like kind of a few different competing cultural values around education right there. But I think the crucial thing is both my parents were pretty much the first in both of their generation was the first generation in both their families to go to university.
Right. Okay.
Right. And so, like the idea that me and, my brother would be like, we're not going to do that, I think was initially met with some hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I went straight from, school community radio to suddenly being on national television
Right, yeah,
relatively
yeah.
quickly. But, that TV show was also axed before I turned 21.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked out very quickly that I always need to have like 2 or 3 jobs
Mm-hmm.
on the go at any one time if you're going to survive. And I've now escalated that to about 14 jobs.
Yeah. You're always doing something.
Yeah, and I think you have to. Personally, look, there's a few things. One, I get bored really easily. And also you just don't know when shows are just going to disappear. Like you just don't, and it's such an unreliable and weird business that I'm like, and also TV networks are not loyal places.
Yeah.
Like even ones that I love, like SBS, like they're not. Like they exist for self-preservation reasons, and that's fine so long as you are making things that help them preserve themselves, but that's not guaranteed. And I say this particularly with the 2 public broadcasters because obviously I love working for SBS and the ABC, but they're not your friends, and so you kind of don't. And they kind of sometimes lull you into this sense of like, oh, we're a broad social good. I'm like, yes, you are, but that doesn't mean you exist to take care of the people that work there. So my attitude is I want to make really good things, but I don't want to be tethered to any place that can control it.
Yeah.
And I think the more good work you do, the more insulated you are.
Yeah.
So I'm always in pre-production, post-production, and production on something at any given moment. So something being finished off in edit, something being shot, or something being planned, and I'm constantly doing that at any one moment. And it also takes the pressure out. Like if a show or a podcast or something doesn't work, you always know that you're working on something else. It takes some of the anxiety out of it.
Yeah.
I think so. That's always been my approach to it. It's mostly just my way of dealing with my weird mental health issues.
So now I feel for your mum. Because how is she meant to know what exactly you're doing at one time? But like there has to be an overarching thing here. And I think the word here is storyteller.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I say it took me years to own the term journalist. Because I was a film critic that fell into interviewing people and then I started doing documentaries. It was only really like, I've never felt super comfortable with the term. So I tend to go with like journalist / maker of things. But story, yours is much more poetic than mine.
Well,
I should
I think
probably go with
it's
yours.
the Asian in us as well, that we have been really good storytellers for a long time. It's just the mediums that we've been using have changed over time, and how we approach different ways of exploring new things. Like, for example, Stuff the British Stole. It's so expansive. There's so much you can take with it, but you've been able to use different mediums to tell amazing stories and also move with the times. Like, I remember you talking about how you did the podcast first, and then people really wanted to see these artifacts. They wanted to engage with them visually because there's something about preserving them in a visual element that makes them feel more real. And then you have had the book now. And I also just want to know, like, how is it transitioning between so many different mediums?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think Like specifically with stuff or with like in
I
general?
mean, like going, like, because at any one moment you could be working on a podcast and the next project that comes along for you could be a TV show, and then the next project that comes along is a novel, right?
Yeah.
So how have you found being able to switch through different ways of creative language?
They kind of service different parts of my brain, right? So one of the reasons why I love audio in particular is the audience, the listener, is a willing accomplice, right? So when I'm doing like the Stuff the British Style podcast or the podcast I do with Audible or No One Saw It Coming, my ABC series, one of the things I love most about that is like you're building an image in people's minds.
Yep.
And you can be very selective. Like you can build an image of a castle and then give them one crucial detail that completely changes the image in their head. And I love that the audience is a willing accomplice in that idea. And there's something really powerful about that. In some ways, it's more akin to book writing. So because as a reader, you're constantly dealing with their imagination. What I love about television, particularly the kind of television I make, is that you can really take people all around the world. Like I always say with Stuff the British Style in particular, it's a mystery show first, a travel show second, and then a history show third. Mm-hmm. Because if you can't get people to care and engage with the mystery and the sense of adventure, they're not going to care about the history.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm also the director and the showrunner of Stuff the British Style, so every bit of it eventually runs through me. And I think it's always been very important to me that show, it feels like a blockbuster, that it feels like this big adventure because that history is not small. You know, we're talking about an empire that ruled a quarter of the world's land and population at its peak. Like it's not a small story.
Yeah.
But we look for quirky ways in which to kind of build that expanse. So they're different challenges. And I think for me, I like the cross-pollination. So one of the advantages of being in pre-production, post-production and production all at the same time is I can watch I remember shooting season 2 of stuff and I was watching edits of a doco that we had coming out here. And I was watching it just going, I really wish we'd shot it differently, like with the camera a bit more movement. And then I was like, well, I guess I can do that tomorrow on this thing that I'm shooting now.
Yeah.
Or if you're in edit and you're about to plan a next shoot and you're sitting there in edit going, oh my God, we didn't ask this crucial question. We didn't get pictures like this. As you plan the next thing, that you're going to get that damn stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think having multiple things and multiple different creative projects on the go, that I view it, yes, it's exhausting and I often sit back and go, bitten off more than I can chew. But I also view it as cross-pollination and that the creative ideas or your mistakes and screw-ups from one day can help improve the thing you're doing the next day.
I'd love to talk about the Koh-i-Noor.
Oh, yes.
Diamond.
Yes.
It was episode 1.
Do you have a claim on it as well? Everyone seems
Well,
to.
you have said that you won't have any claims on it. And I feel like that's a very... Well, I mean, in the episode, you go through how complex that history is, and how many people are, claiming it. I think the main thing here is that there has to be accountability for what's happened and where it is today. And
well, the sheer number of claims is partially like a defense mechanism, is partially why I don't think it will ever be returned to anyone, because the British royal family or the houses can basically say, well, you want to claim it, you want to claim it, they want to claim it, the Taliban want to claim it. And that kind of holds it in stasis, I think. And those kinds of... And because history is complicated and a lot of those claims have value, that's the sort of stuff that keeps those claims in stasis. That and the fact that possession is 9/10 of the law.
Have you thought about how exploring these stories, especially understanding colonization, they are relevant today? Because some people think about history is in the past, we have to learn from the lessons, but I think you pick up on the details very well.
I am always very surprised. Well, no, am I surprised? There's a sort of... whenever we do a new season of Stuff the British Style or the book or anything like that, I sort of have to gird myself because I know that I'm going to be faced with an onslaught of just people being like, it's not that important and the past is past, get over it, and you guys just want it for the money, and... why do you hate white people? And I just have to gird myself for that every time we do it because it's just unrelenting. I think something interesting's happened this year where it's just become pretty naked. Like people just like, we won, you lost. Getting a lot of that. You know, there used to be, oh, well, we preserved it and therefore we should keep it, which is actually, I think, a valid position. It's not one that I think doesn't have merit. I think a lot of objects in museums and galleries simply wouldn't exist had they not been stolen. Like, that's a fact. And I'm happy to back that as a fact. But what I've noticed in the last year is just we've gone from casual racism to just straight up naked racism. And I was surprised by that because I've done projects about racism in the past and sort of gotten, you know, like death threats and things like that. But I think I was surprised with this new season of just how comfortable people were with like, well, Egyptians can't be trusted with their own stuff. I'm like, sorry, what are we saying here? You know, like there's something that's changed in our culture in the last, I reckon, year and a half where there's a certain cohort of people online that are just real comfortable to say openly racist things with their names, with pictures of them and their kids in their profile pictures. Yes, I see them. Like, they're just really comfortable with it. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So you're having targeted, commentary on you.
Look.
Attacks, basically.
Look, here's the thing. I made a show called Stuff the British Stole.
Yes.
It's not like I didn't throw the first stone.
Right.
So I'm not out here being like, I'm a victim. You know, like I'm not. Like there's a sort of the people on a certain end of the political spectrum often end up being like, I'm targeted and I'm a victim. Yeah, I mean, I got paid to make a show with that title. I'm not a part of the cultural debate.
Yeah.
So that's, and also a lot of those people would argue that simply making a show called Stuff the British Stole is inherently racist, which is an interesting position. I'm intrigued by it. I can't say I agree or disagree, but I'm like, okay, that's an interesting position. It's done now. I remember having a meeting. The show was very hard, reasonably easy to sell to different markets around the world, but very hard to sell into the UK, shockingly. And I remember having a meeting with one of the distributors being like, so hypothetically, would you be okay? Just a thought, maybe, just so we can sell it into the UK, of changing the title. And they were so careful. I think they were so worried about how I'd react. And I'm like, go for it. I don't care. Like, nothing would thrill me. Nothing would make me laugh harder than the only place that needed the title change was like. Can you imagine how funny that would have been?
Yeah.
I was like, go for it. I think it'd be hilarious. They didn't end up doing it in the end.
Okay.
I think it's on. You can stream it on Channel 4 at the moment.
But they didn't change the title.
No, they didn't change the title. It's like even there's a different. So the book has a different cover in the UK. Still the same title, but they've just gone for a slightly different look in the UK. And I think I slightly prefer the UK cover. But it's like, I probably underestimated how unpalatable the title is in the UK. I can't do anything about it. Like, the title is what made it a hit. But it's a double-edged sword, right? So there's lots of people, you know. I remember we were shooting season 1 of Stuff the British Stole. We had a very well-known British Asian historian who was booked on the show, and, you know, we'd agreed to an amount of money should be paid. And then within about 4 to 6 hours before the shoot, got an email from our agent going, "Oh, we don't think it'd be good for our reputation to be on the show."
Wow.
Yeah, I'll let people work out who it is.
Okay.
It's not a big field to draw from.
Everyone's gonna do a deep dive after this.
Yeah, but like, and that was with like literally within a couple of hours of interview. Like, we don't think this is good for her reputation to do the show.
But doesn't that make you think about how truth telling is really like it is as important, but it's being so heavily contested, and the way that we present knowledge and facts has never been more important. But I feel like we are kind of masking it with other things that make it more palatable. Yeah,
I mean, I think history, particularly British history, hides a lot behind politeness. You know, I often say that the show is a reaction to the inadequacy of museum plaques, because like you walk through museums and galleries and they've got these 80 words to tell you what this thing is. And I just feel like museums and galleries misuse those 80 words so often. Because I love museums and galleries, and they're filled with amazing stories and amazing mysteries, but they just don't tell you those stories. I don't know why, but instead you get this like, it was acquired from the Getty collection and it was from the 13th century. I'm like, who cares? Like, actually what I want to know was that, you know, it was created by a ruler who was murdered and then blah, blah, blah. Like, tell me the actually interesting story. Tell me the complicated story. Because that's the thing. Like, I am not interested in good guy, bad guy, black and white. If we've got a clear black and white story, I won't do it, because I'm like, what are we going to do for the other 28 minutes. You know what I mean? I'm interested in grey areas. I'm
Yeah.
interested in stories with moral quandaries where actually it's impossible to take a position by the end of it. That's the stuff I'm fascinated by. And not just with stuff the British style, with anything. I'm like, if you've got a story where it's like it's really easy to be like, that's injustice at the end, I'm bored. Whereas if you got a story at the end, you're like, oh, I mean, it was stolen, but maybe they stole it is good, but at the same time, people want it back, and maybe things should change now. Like, that's interesting to me. Like, moral grey areas are super interesting to me.
Yeah.
I rambled. I'm so sorry. I'll stop now.
No, thank you for that. Well, listeners and viewers, Stuff the British Stole Season 3 is now out and is on ABC because someone didn't give back to Marc from SBS.
It's quite literally.
And his new novel is out as well. So check out those amazing mediums that we have to explore, stuff the British stole. My final question for you, Marc. We're going to circle back to Mastermind now.
Yeah, let's do it.
What is the subject area that you'd love to be tested on Mastermind?
Well, funnily enough, I've done it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it?
So before I took over as host, I was invited on as part of the celebrity edition, and I did Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh.
Yeah, and I did really badly.
Because you said your inspiration is, I'm going to get it. Is it Captain Picard? Captain.
She did good.
Nerds Unite, for
Yeah.
real, right here. Incredible Star Trek. Mine
Yeah.
would be Bollywood. And I've heard, I've seen
We don't have enough people
Bollywood for
doing
beginners.
Bollywood stuff. You should do it. Come on.
Dilpreet and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
We've done people have done like SRK and a few like specific people. My recommend. If people want to go on Mastermind, a few things I would say. Right?
Okay.
Don't go too broad.
Okay.
Right. So if you're going to pick a TV series, pick a season of a TV series.
Right.
If you're going to pick and we will work with you on working out what your sources are. Right. So we do this for everybody, not just
Okay.
you. So if somebody says, I want to do Shah Rukh Khan.
That is literally what I was going to say.
Okay. So what I would say is Shah Rukh Khan could work, right?
Okay.
What might be better is to be like Shah Rukh Khan in the 2000s.
That's literally what I was going to say as well.
So
Okay.
just like, because it's too broad, and I think people go too broad, it's too much to draw from.
But there's a lot in the 2000s with Shah Rukh Khan we can just explore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Remakes of Devdas or something like that. You know what I mean? Like pick something that has, because Devdas, I think, has been made like 3 times. So you do
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
So just like pick something that is contained. And I would say this to anybody. Like people are always like, I want to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm like, no, you don't. You want to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 3. That's all you want to do.
Right. Thank you for the handbook on Mastermind because I think I aced my audition, but if I bombed it, I'll definitely come back as a contestant and
Yeah.
it'll be on Shah Rukh Khan. Thank you, Marc, for joining me on SBS Spice.
Thank you for having me. Did I talk nonsense? I feel like I talk nonsense.
Everything was pure gold.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.